Hey everybody, guess what? It's me, Robert Phoenix, and I'm back. And I'm in a new space. A virtual space. Literally and figuratively. What's going on out there? Yes, it's Sunday Night Astro Live with me, yours truly, 7:30 p.m. right here, broadcasting to you live from Fredericksburg, along with Jasper the Astro Cat. Let's see, there's 1-0 Dragon. What's happening, 1-0 Dragon? Hey, I'm playing with a new background tonight, which is very interesting in a lot of ways. Like, we're all kind of melty in here. What do you guys think of this new background? If I don't move too much, it's kind of interesting, don't you think? No? Don't you think it's a kind of... Hey, Judy, what's happening? There's Maury. What's going on, Maury? There's Sandra. Hello, Sandra. Greetings. Oh, yeah, there's a little Jasper graphic. He got in right away tonight. You're now at the center of the universe. Yes, and I'm proving that the world is actually round. Check that out. The Earth is round. I'm not sure if the Earth is round. And I'm not sure if it's flat either. And I'm not sure if anybody really truly knows. But I did see a really interesting documentary. The documentary is called Rocket Man. And it is not the documentary about Elton John or the film about Elton John. It's about a guy who lives out in the desert in California and launched himself into space. Hey, Shauna, nice to see you. What's going on? And he launched himself into space. He was about 1/8 of a mile up. This guy's a really interesting character. And he wants to prove to himself what the condition of the Earth is, whether it's flat or round. And he has a plan to get 68 miles up through the Earth's atmosphere. And it's a fascinating documentary for a number of different reasons. I highly recommend it. It's called Rocket Man. You can find it over on Amazon Prime. The trailer is available on YouTube. Hey, Robin, nice to see you. There's Joni. Hello, Tamara. It looks amazing. Well, you know, it's a little green screeny in some ways, right? Like in liquid. I got this kind of liquid effect going on tonight. I really feel virtual. It's almost like Max Headroom, Jasper Headroom. Hi, Kim. The viewers can pretend they're in LSD and melting with you. I know. Let's all just trip together, shall we? Let's all just trip together. Anyway, I highly recommend Rocket Man. It's really, really good. It's a really good video, and it's a video about the testament of the human spirit in a lot of ways. And the guy who decides that he's going to go, what's his name? Give me a second. I got to find out his name. I just can't keep calling him the guy. He deserves more than that. The guy's got he's got huevos. He has huevos. Rocket Man documentary. Let's see. Out here. What's his name? Give me a second. Mike Hughes. Mad Mike Hughes. I guess maybe I could even do like a little visual here. Do a little screen share little thing. Do space on space, I guess. Mad Mike's mission to prove the flat Earth. The Earth is flat. So I watched this with my mother while she was in town. She actually really enjoyed it. And let me shoot you this. Right here, there it is. Rocket Man, the documentary. Mad Mike's mission to prove the flat Earth. There's the trailer on the inside. How to watch the film, the Amazon link. It's on Fandango, Google Play. And here it is, Mad Mike's mission to prove the flat Earth is a documentary about an aging daredevil named Mad Mike Hughes. Decides to launch himself in a homemade rocket. This guy's really quite something. And here's Mike Hughes, and these are his two buddies. And this guy is a big-time Christian, and he owns a software company, Patrick Marchese, Roadside Samaritan. And then this guy, Waldo, he's his landlord, but in a strange, odd twist, Waldo also happens to have an enormous collection of rocket boosters. So not only is he his landlord, but he's actually able to assist him on his journey into space. And then these are a number of other people that show up along the way. That's Waldo's very trippy looking daughter. And there is the filmmakers, Toby Brousseau and Michael Lynn. But Mad Mike is the guy. This is the dude right here, Mad Mike Hughes. And at one point in time, he decided instead of doing, here's his website, instead of doing motorcycle launches, he decided to do limo launches. Like he became the Evel Knievel of limousines. How crazy is that? And if you want to donate to his cause, there's a PayPal there, right there. And it's a really fascinating, there's his limo. It's a really, really fascinating look into human nature in a lot of ways. Because one of the things that comes out in the video is just how absolutely cruel the rest of the world can be to this guy. Because it's like he's not doing anybody any harm. But there are people that are just really vicious and calling him a moron. And Lewis Black, who you saw there, he was doing a little comedic show and called him a moron. And it's like, he's like taking all of these slings and arrows of just vicious intent in a lot of ways. And he's got an amazing attitude and he shrugs it off. And I don't want to spoil anything. You need to watch it if you're into it. If you're into this idea or into this this story. Jasper's disappearing. Jasper just disappeared right out of the matrix. There's like a zone that if you step out of the zone, you cease to exist, apparently, in this program. And now he's back. He's back in the zone. This is such a trip, man. I'm having a fun time tonight. So how was everybody? How was your Christmases? Did you guys have a good Christmas? It was we had a good Christmas here, I think. The old gal was in town, and that's why I wasn't really doing a lot of media. Like when my mother's in town, she's the most high maintenance, low maintenance person I've ever met. She doesn't do a whole lot. She doesn't really require a whole lot, but in that space, she does require attention. Not any kind of weird like medical attention. She's fine that way, but I got to keep her kind of occupied and enjoying the ride. So we had a good time. We had a really good time. I felt like this Christmas was a pretty low key in a lot of ways. I don't really celebrate Christmas in the same way that I used to, because I really don't believe Jesus was born on the 24th of December. And you know, I've got a plenty of material that on my website that looks at the 9/11 day as his birth, and I've got an idea for a new post, which even looks at a potentially different year than the one that I've put up there. I'm not going to talk about it just yet because I'd like to actually explore it a bit. The idea is Jesus as a millennial. I'm sure the millennials would love that, right? Watch some college football yesterday, and I watched Clemson versus Ohio State into that game. And the thing that was interesting about that Clemson game, and obviously Clemson's in the South, and the South has a very, very different take on religion. And when they were interviewing the players, the quarterback for Clemson and the head coach for Clemson, it was like, you know, Jesus Christ, Lord, Savior, God, you know, right out in front. And you don't see that a lot anymore. Like when they do interviews with players in pro football, you don't see that a lot anymore. You know, they don't bust that out a lot. And I remember back in the day when this is back in the 90s, after the game, they still do this, by the way, but they don't show it, they don't air it. Back in the 90s, there was a guy by the name of, was it Steve Wallace or I think it was Steve Wallace or Guy. What was his name? Guy, shoot. He played for the San Francisco 49ers. He played guard. And he started to do these prayer circles after the game. And the networks would show them. They would show the prayer circles. And then they stopped doing it. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not doing it anymore. They're doing it. They just don't show that anymore. But it's interesting. The reason I'm bringing this up, we're going to cover this a little bit tonight on some of the eclipse review, which I'm going to get into. What happened over the eclipse, so we can kind of get a sense as to where the eclipse and the eclipse energy is headed. And we got another eclipse coming up here really shortly, second week in January. We're going to look at that tonight. And I'm also going to look at Prince William's chart. And it's very interesting, and I'm going to look at it in relationship with the chart of the UN, which I think you'll find fascinating. I know I did when I put the two together. And what else? What else are we going to look at tonight? Is that it? Oh, some predictions. I guess I have some predictions. This is going to be prediction part 1. Predictions for 2020 part 1. I'm going to do part 2 next week. So this is going to be more like general overview predictions, or and then next week I'll get like super specific on stuff. So this is sort of the part 1 piece, the general overview. So the reason I brought this up with the college game is, again, these kids that are now playing in college football are Pluto and Sag kids. They are Generation Z, Gen Z, and they are Zoomers, and they have a different kind of relationship with faith than their millennial predecessors. And that's not to say that all millennials are faithless. That would be incorrect. But it's much closer to the surface. Let's put it that way. Lamar Jackson, who's the quarterback of the Baltimore Ravens, a tremendous athlete, tremendous story, very open about his Christian faith. We're going to see more of this, right? Because the Gen Z kids are going to be they're either going to be more imbued with their faith right on the surface, or they'll be kind of more classically, to some extent, atheistic, because this is what Sagittarius does. They're born under Pluto and Sagittarius. And they tend to be, Sagittarius is a sign that is either deeply driven by a sense of faith, or Sagittarius could go to the other side of the spectrum and also be very atheistic at times, because of some event that has caused the Sagittarian individual, let's say, to move to the other side of the spectrum. And we've seen that. We've seen Sagittarians, I've seen Sagittarians be utterly faithless and completely hedonistic and then find God. And I've seen the other to be true, where their faith is tested so much that they wind up losing faith and have a very difficult time. Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens being one example of that. So anyway, it was just an interesting notice. And a lot of these kids that are starting to, they're 21, 20, these are the kids that were born in like 1996, 1997, 1998. And they have Uranus in the sign of Aquarius. They have Uranus in its own sign. And they also have Neptune in Aquarius. So this is a very interesting group of kids that are going to be coming onto the scene. You want to really pay close attention to the 23, 22, and 21-year-olds, 19. So I think we went into a phase shift with Neptune and Pisces. So Neptune went from Aquarius to Pisces, and Uranus. Neptune went into, and Uranus went into, let's see, Neptune was in Aquarius for quite a while. It was in Aquarius until 2011 when it went into Pisces, but Uranus goes into Pisces at around 2000, if I'm not mistaken. So it's those kids born between 1996 and roughly 2000. Those are very interesting kids because they're born with that Neptune-Uranus conjunction. And we saw some of that Neptune-Uranus conjunction with the millennial kids. That's been quite interesting to witness and watch, especially since Saturn has come in and hit their Neptunes and hit their Uranuses. And one of the things that I witnessed, I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, coming out of a wedding, and this is the wedding of the young fellow who actually helped co-produce my astrological video, Pluto and Scorpio. His Pluto on the midheaven, Uranus and Neptune in the Capricorn, and then Saturn coming in and hitting his Uranus and hitting his Neptune, and really him deciding he wanted to grow. And he got married, and he really changed his belief system in a lot of ways, and he started to just get super solid. And this is what happens when Saturn comes in and begins to impact, these generations, these trans generations. We see the individuals, when they're ready, they grow up and they mature. That's exactly what he did. He stepped forward. So we'll see this when Saturn goes into Aquarius, which is not that far off. Saturn will go into Aquarius it hits Aquarius this summer, and it's there for a brief period of time. And then it goes into Aquarius retrogrades, and then goes back into Aquarius again in December, late December of 2020, where it's there for 3 years. So when Saturn's in Aquarius, it's gonna hit both Uranus and Neptune of Gen Z. Okay, so that's where we're gonna see it. So we're gonna see another generation begin to start to solidify, because that's what Saturn theoretically does. It works on the solidification process. But they're going to be very interesting to watch for sure, because they're also going to have, at some point, Pluto is going to go into Aquarius, and it's going to hit their Uranus, and it's going to hit their Neptune, and that's going to be really something. Really something. Just like for some of the millennials, when Pluto went into Capricorn and started to hit their Uranus and hit their Neptunes, and again, the millennial culture, if you want to call it that, has been a game changer for a number of different reasons. Whether you like it or not, whether you're on the side of the millennials or the millennial, it's been a game changer. It's changed everything. And it's not just them, but it's the people who are targeting, supporting, and framing them. And I'll give you an example. I guess it was about 3 years ago, 2-3 years ago, I was really drilling down into a lot of Agenda 21, Agenda 2030 stuff, and started to look at these videos that were basically videos of meetings that were taking place in Southern California. This guy by the name of Grindall, Grindall, who's done a lot of really interesting videos and has thrown himself right into the fire of the Agenda 21 thing in Southern California, along with that guy, the Fullerton Observer. Is that his name? Anyway, one of the things that they captured in video was how the planning boards and the planning commissions were especially creating and targeting these new cities for millennials, right? Well, they said, well, we want to build the new urban centers for this group. And they believe that they knew what that group theoretically wanted, right? Because they've done all their studies, they've drilled down into their psychographics. And so really what they thought they wanted was convenience and comfort and more about lifestyle versus creating or building a quote unquote life. And there's a kind of a distinct difference between the two, right? And one of them is, well, okay, these are things that are important to me. And the things that are important to me, well, I want to have, craft beer or craft craft coffee, or I want to be able to, Uber around, and have all these creature comforts. What I don't want, theoretically, is I don't want to have sort of the hassle of having to own a home, learn how to fix things. And I know I'm generalizing here, and that's not, I don't want to say that all the millennials are like this, but they were able to kind of separate out through their, their psychographics what they want, right? So they're creating this kind of new theoretical, or at least at the very least, they're rationalizing this new urban reality, right? The Agenda 21, Agenda 2030 reality, based on what they think the millennials want. So again, just keep that in mind, because this is a culture shift. This is a culture change. And you can see the culture shift and the culture change in cinema. You can see it on TV, commercials. It's clearly not my world. So it's just not. I look at this stuff and three-quarters of the time I don't relate. And that's okay. I'm not really supposed to relate. Because at some point, my story and the story of my generation theoretically will be over. So it'll be up to whoever comes next, and what they do, what they're able to sign off on and contribute. To that extent, the Gen Z kids are going to be very different. They're going to be very, very different. And just as we've seen the millennials change culture because it's embedded in their chart, the outer planets with Neptune in Capricorn and Uranus in Capricorn. Capricorn represents theoretically the height of culture, or at the very least the world. And they're going to radically change it, right, with Uranus. And Neptune represents either dissatisfaction or dream. And what's the dream? And the two are at times intrinsically linked, right? Because if you're dissatisfied and then you have a dream, well, then you have something really potent that you can sign up for, right? And then we have Pluto and Scorpio, which is very intense and in a lot of ways very uncompromising. Very uncompromising. So, but what the Gen Z kids are going to do is they're going to play a huge role in this idea of what comes after culture or dominant culture, or this kind of historical canon that we've been in since 1900. Because we're going to move beyond that. A lot of people thought that, well, over the holidays, we just catapulted into the new age. Have you guys been feeling that? You've been feeling like we catapulted in the new age? And a lot of this is based on the fact that we had all these planets that were aligned right around Christmas in the sidereal chart, not the Placidus chart, but the sidereal chart. And in the sidereal chart, they were all lined up in Sagittarius. They're all lined up and kind of, connected to the galactic center. And it was from that moment forward that we were going to begin to experience this new age. Yeah, because I work with Placidus charts, I don't really see it in that way, and I certainly don't feel in that way. Although I will say, though, that this is a very important year, and I talked about this not on Sunday, but the Sunday before last, that this is a really important year. This is a year that is kind of a make it or break it year. This is a time where we can step up, we get into that numerological potency of 2020 and 22 and this idea that we're working with, the aeon or judgment times 2, and we can reconcile. It's kind of interesting that the word reckoning and reconcile are linked, right? They're syntactical relatives, because what we're seeing is we're seeing that we're kind of in the time of reckoning, and we've kind of been there. It's not anything new, but the acceleration is going to really take off in 2020. There's just going to be no hiding out anymore. You're going to be on it, right? You're going to have to deal. So I've been, sharing this with people over the past year, which is try to get clear. Do your best to get clear. Do your best to clean up your mess, whether it's your body, whether it's your finances, whether it's your belief systems, clean up your mess, because when we move into 2020, there's going to be an opportunity for you to move through things very, very quickly. And whatever you haven't cleaned up, you get to deal with it viscerally. So the idea here was to get to this point so you could have a good shot at acceleration. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the Gen Z kids. It's going to be fascinating to watch them, and they're going to be the ones that are going to define this idea of this new age, or the age of Aquarius, which I don't think we're at quite yet, even though there are people that are prognosticating that, because I think we've got a few more things to get to. But that idea, right? The idea that we could all be, I mean, for me, how I view the age of Aquarius is that we are, each and every one of ourselves, the center of the universe, and we're not. We understand sort of the divine significance, our connection to Logos, or Logos, however you want to pronounce it, and we're connected to a network of other inspired people who are experiencing the same thing. And so when we are together, we are more powerful as a group based on who we are individually, connected up to the highest parts of ourselves, our divine nature, our Logos, our personal Logos. To me, that's the Aquarian age, and there's no middleman. You know, we are the high priests or the high priestesses of our own experience, of our own divine experience. We're responsible for everything, and everybody else is as well. You know, it's like getting rid of the middleman, and the middleman can be anything. The middleman can be the church. It could even be some form of governance. You know, it could be some form of structure that says, well, you need to behave this way, or you need to conform in this direction. We don't really need as much of that. You know, we can become responsible, accountable beings at every single turn of our own experience. And when that happens, then those institutions dissipate, and then they begin to fade away. They don't have the same kind of intrinsic power, because we're the ones that are being responsible for that. And to me, that is the age of Aquarius, right? We don't have to rely solely on these third-party platforms, that we become these literal independent producers, but we're linked together because we understand that we can't do it by ourselves, and we're stronger as a result of that. So, yeah, that's what I'm thinking about. All right, I'm going to get into some charts, and we're going to kind of look at some of the eclipse stuff. Before I do, I want to just talk a little bit about sort of the chat room. I don't always pay attention to the chat room while I'm doing the show for obvious reasons, because I want to do the show and not have to necessarily pay attention to the chat. Though I do check in with you guys, because I do want to find out what you're talking about, if you have any questions, and I think it's an important thing. And I just want to be clear about what goes on in the chat, at least from my perspective. I try to leave well enough alone. You guys are all adults in there. You guys have been hanging out together and bonding together, and people are not always going to disagree. Somebody's going to have a bad day. Somebody's going to be triggered. It happens, okay? We're human. It happens. And if we have a little margin for error with our fellow humans and try to save a little bit of face, it can be really, really helpful, all right? And sometimes those things can't be reconciled. It's just the way it is. And sometimes things have to happen because those things cannot be reconciled. But that said, if they can't be reconciled, just remember, I would say we're all on the same team. Just remember that. We're all on the same team. And we're all doing our best. And none of us are perfect. We're not perfect. We have our blemishes, we have our imperfections, but you know what? We're doing our best to reconcile those things, and so that we can all move together and get to this next level together, which I think is very doable, very, very doable. So before you shout somebody down in the chat room, just remember they're on your team, okay? And when I coached baseball, one of the things that I got real clear about when I coached is that when I was in a game and I was managing, I would never try to correct anybody during the game. Never. I would never point things out. We would just play. And then I'd remember the situations and we would talk about them in practice. I would never, ever, ever try to do that kind of coaching in a game. I might tell a pitcher to calm down or to breathe, or, there may be just some attitudinal things that could be adjusted, which we would talk about. And the other thing is that I did my very, very best to keep it positive. Because if somebody makes a mistake, the worst thing you can do is to pile on them when they make a mistake. And I learned this. I coached baseball for five teams, 5 seasons. And it was really a great learning experience for me as well. So, I'd like to just throw that out there and apply that to the chat room. Or if you disagree with somebody, that's fine. You can disagree with them, but treat them in a way that is respectful at the very least. Okay, be respectful. Just remember, you could be on the other end of that too. And you could say something, next thing you know, you got somebody piling on you. And and look, disagreements happen. I'm okay with disagreements, but let's try to, at the very least, understand and have some awareness before we start pointing fingers at one another and saying, well, you're this or you're that or you're this and you're that. And that's really not the case. And sometimes we are this or that, but maybe we deserve a benefit of the doubt. And each and every one of you has the ability to do that, right? All right, so before I get into some of these charts, let me check in with you guys in Chatlandia and see where you're at. I'm sorry, tropical, thanks. No, thank you. Yes, I meant to say tropical. My bad, tropical placidus. Thank you. Yes. Love the new background. And thank you, Linda, I appreciate that. Yes, I had placidus on my mind. Let's see, what else we have here. Love your new background. That's funny. It's a funny background. I just saw it tonight. Hey, there's Beverly. Hi, Beverly. Nice to see you. Okay, it's going to be another Roaring 20s. I like that. The Roaring 20s. 20s were intense, man. The 20s were intense. Tropical. Western Placidus. Tropical, mundane astrology. All right, let's get into some of these charts. So one of the things that I wanted to track a little bit is what happened over the eclipse. And some very interesting things happened during the eclipse. Now, remember, the eclipse path was over the South Pacific. Is that trippy? It's sort of like, I like this reality here. It's sort of interesting. And this is green. So it gets into that green thing. Where did it go? Oh, it's here now. Mountain Valley. So one of the things that we talked about in the run-up to the eclipse was what was going to happen across the Ring of Fire in the South Pacific. Well, we had our share of kind of geophysical intensity. And one of the things that popped up during the eclipse was this. This is in the Philippines. There was a pretty significant typhoon. So this is the 27th of December. This is the aftermath of the eclipse, of the typhoon, which happened right around the eclipse. And the typhoon was Typhoon Phanphone, I believe, which swept through the central Philippines on Christmas Eve. Has killed these 28 people, leaving large areas in shambles with thousands losing their homes and livelihoods. Now remember, the eclipse phase really starts about 2.5 weeks before, 2.5 weeks after, and lasts up to 6 months. So one of the things that we're going to be doing over the course of the next 6 months is we're going to be tracking that area. We're going to be tracking the Ring of Fire in Southeast Asia. This is clearly something fairly intense, right? There was drowning, falling trees, electrocution. So it's been very difficult to reach some of the people in these areas. And here's what it looked like from off the charts. Super typhoon, high end, hits the Philippines. So the storm strength could be historic. This thing was massive, right? Massive, this super typhoon. And had a picture of it. So it's interesting, and at the same time, it's also not interesting because people's lives were lost and there is a great deal of devastation. But we can see, to some extent, sort of this geocosmic trail of the eclipse, which took place in Southeast Asia. Now, the other thing that happened there was what happened with China, right? And there was a pretty significant protest and demonstration in China, and it was on Christmas Day. Let me see if I can find it. Here it is. Check this out. I'm gonna play this for you guys. Remember, I said that eclipse. I talked about this on this show, and also with Regina and with Heather. And so it was on Christmas Eve, which was right when the eclipse sun. Well, it was actually following that. Was it the 24th? So it would have been on the 26th in Southeast Asia. But I want to play this for you because this is right in that eclipse zone, as the sun was going to eclipse Hong Kong's midheaven. So check this out. This is some of what happened in Hong Kong on Christmas Eve. And remember that not the millennials, but Generation Z plays a pretty significant role here. This is streamed live on the 24th on Christmas Eve. Play a pretty significant role in what's going on in Hong Kong. These are very young people that are protesting in Hong Kong. So we see some of the same yellow vest attire, which is becoming this universal symbol now for protests, and it's going to heat up here pretty soon. You're going to see people with gas masks and all kinds of stuff. Let's see how long is this. This is 54 minutes. Let me see if I can move forward. Here we go. So they're out with their shields. It seems to be a fairly regular occurrence. There was some really intense footage. So I can find it. Oh, there's some lovely protesters walking in. Okay, here's the stormtroopers. This is on Christmas Eve. Push back, get back. Let me see. Here we go. Intense police presence. There was a, let me hold on a second. There was a, this other video that was before this one. Let me find it. Give me 1 second. Just gives you more of a feeling about the protests. Here we go. This is the one. This is because it was citywide. It was a citywide protest, obviously. So this is the footage that I wanted to share with you here. This is what you're going to see here. So very different. You know, that one was just kind of a generic live stream. So they're at malls. These are all young people, right? These are all going to be roughly Gen Z people, Gen Z kids. They're all in their early 20s, then their teens. So they have plainclothes police officers. A lot of these are probably guys are Red China, the Red Chinese embedded, Chinese nationalist army embedded. Some of the riot police come in. It's interesting that they're protesting in malls, of all places. Was this some sort of like capitalist thing? Who knows? Tear gas on the streets. This is outside the Peninsula Hotel. I guess those are middle fingers. What's that? Now they're firing the tear gas into the crowd. A little Christmas cocktail. There was this one guy who he gets sprayed in the face with tear gas. Not from one of these guns, but from like a canister or a smaller. They use the umbrellas in China so that the CCTV cameras don't identify them. This has been going on now for months. But on Christmas Eve, it seemed to be fairly heightened. So there's a kid, of course, there's always a baby involved. Reportedly receiving treatment here. Okay. Water cannon brought in. I don't think this is that uncommon, but this is on Christmas Eve, and you'd think that that maybe, just maybe, they'd lighten up, but that's not the case. So this is not going to abate. What's happening in Hong Kong is not going to abate. It's going to continue to go on for a while, especially since we had the eclipse just occur right on the midheaven of Hong Kong. So this whole area that's connected to Southeast Asia, the Ring of Fire, which had this very powerful annular eclipse pass over during that time, during the eclipse phase. We're going to continue to track this as the weeks and the months go on. So anyway, there's your eclipse update and some of the stuff that happened just geographically in that area with the eclipse as well. So one of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted to bring up another eclipse chart. And this is one that's coming up. We looked at this chart before, but because it's coming, it's headed in our direction, it's probably a good idea to take another look at this thing here. 1 second. The last show of the decade. Isn't that crazy? It is the last Sunday night live stream of the decade. I started to do these on Sunday night, I think back in 2015. And I used to do this show on Blog Talk Radio on Fridays. That was generally my big astrological show, was on Fridays, sometimes on Sunday night. But this is the last one of the decade. It's interesting how fast it's all gone by. All right. Here we go. No. There it is. All right. This is the upcoming eclipse. So we're just a few days out from this. And this is right before the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, which is coming, right? The big Saturn-Pluto conjunction. And this eclipse is happening at the Saturn and Pluto are at 22. And then a few days later, right, which is going to be on the 12th and then the 13th, we're going to have the sun at 22. So Saturn and Pluto will be at 22. The sun will be at 22. In what year do we have? 2020, 22. So how I interpret this from a macro level, like the 22, is that this is the year that the quote unquote NWO, or the global governance, right? The people that want to make it all like one unified experience, the New World Order. This is the year I think that they really push forward very intensely with that. While at the same time, people are waking up and coming online, because the two cannot happen without the other. They just can't, because we've been involved in a pretty significant phase of awakening for really the last 10 years. I mean, if we want to go back and start in 2010, because that's when I started to do all this stuff. At the radio, on the radio side, I think the first Sunday night show I did was February of, was it 2010? I think it might have been February of 2010. And I had Ellis Taylor on my show. And then right after that, I had Jay Whitener. So, and this is when all this stuff was starting to break, right? The technology, like people were doing live streams on YouTube then. You know, if you had access to YouTube, you were basically doing videos and uploading them. Some people were doing it. There were some really good people doing video work back then. And I was podcasting. But if we go back into 2010, and just the acceleration between 2010 and 2019, 2020, this has been the most accelerated decade in human awareness, probably since, I would say, the 1960s. Because you may bag the 60s, but there was a ton of awareness that came online. It was like a crash course in interdisciplinary, faith and all these different systems and culture and cinema and drugs. It was very intense. There's this thing called machine learning, right? Where machines are flooded with, all this various kinds of influences. And some of those influences they apply to really interesting ends, right? And that kind of went on during the 1960s. We were flooded with all these ideas, and all, for better or worse, because some of it wasn't all that great. But this last decade, I would say, approaches the 60s. And that kind of intense flooding of awareness. I mean, you could take it from a psychedelic perspective. One could make a case that the last 10 years were the decade of DMT and ayahuasca, popularized by people like Jan Irvin and Joe Rogan and a whole host of other people. While the 60s obviously were more about LSD and mushrooms. And now Terence McKenna obviously plays a role in that, and he's around during the 90s, but it's really like the 2010s where DMT and ayahuasca really hit mainstream in kind of a big way. And now as we close out the 2010s, they're talking about tonight, they had 60 Minutes was beginning to talk about how psilocybin could be a cure for depression. And they're really looking at, finally, after all these years, working with psilocybin and helping people, get over their trauma, their grief, which I think would be a great thing, right? So we're closing out this decade, which saw this massive acceleration with psychedelics, with this very, very close kind of relationship with psychedelics moving more into the mainstream. Now, obviously, cannabis is pretty much already there. So we could make a case that the same kind of psychedelic immersion that took place in the 1960s took place during the 2010s, just different psychedelics. Added to that, the proliferation of the internet, and I'm not sure we can quantify just what a massive role the internet has played over the last 10 years in waking people up. In the last 3 years, or I'd say 2 years, whether you like Q or not, or whether you believe in Q, Q was, again, another kind of massive accelerator. You had soccer moms popping red pills. That's what was happening. Now, I've got my own kind of issues around Q in my own way, because I feel like it's sort of the commodification. You know, I mean, Q became like the McDonald's of truth. And a lot of, you know, there are a bunch of us that had our own little hot dog stands of truth, and then Q comes along and becomes this franchise, right? And for better or worse. And I've never dismissed the fact that I think Q has been a vital part of people awakening. I just don't think that I would, you know, tie my life raft to Q. That's just me. But it's all part of it, right? It's all been part of this last decade. So we've had this massive awakening during the 2010s. And the last time I was here doing this, I said, well, now the time for awakening is over. And somebody said, well, you know, the awakening is never stops. And I would agree with that to a certain extent, but there's a time where we make a shift and we take what we learn and we take what we know and we put it into the world. We bring it into the world. It's kind of like there's a time for a person, you know, it's kind of like Kung Fu. Remember Kung Fu? Kwai Chang Caine, David Carradine. There's that moment where he's got to leave the Shaolin Temple. And he picks up that thing with his forearms, right? And he walks this kind of big, hot coal box with the dragons on each side of it. So that by the time he gets to the end of this path, he's got these dragons burned into his forearms. Then he leaves the temple. He can't stay in the temple forever. And it is our time to leave the temple. We got to go out into the world and we have to do our thing. And that's what I was talking about. All right, let's get into this eclipse. What's interesting about this, and I just chose Washington, D.C. What's interesting about this eclipse for me happens to be the midheaven, which is at 0 Aquarius. So if one wanted to make this case that there is something significant about the sign of Aquarius and this so-called beginning of an Aquarian age, that this midheaven would play kind of an interesting role. Now, things aren't always peachy keen with Aquarius. As a sign, I like it. I like Aquarian people. I think they're really interesting people and by and large pretty cool people, right? But there's other sides. There's like duality to every sign. So we have this idea of brotherhood and esprit de corps with Aquarius, but we also have the one size fits all, the greater good model of Aquarius too. And so part of what we as humans will do is we will sort this stuff out. You know, what's good for me is generally theoretically good for me, or good for you is good for you. And we find a way to negotiate that, make a bridge, and then have a network, a viable network. The other side of that is sort of the top-down model that says, well, this is how it's going to be. And what's interesting about this eclipse has to do with the fact that Pluto is right here within 8 degrees of the midheaven, of this 0 Aquarian midheaven. So to me, it represents something that has the potential to shift or change trajectory. This eclipse. It has the potential to shift or change trajectory, and it moves into that Saturn-Pluto conjunction just a couple days after that. Now, a lot of times with these astrological phases and cycles, there's a lot of expectation, because we've been talking about this Saturn-Pluto conjunction for the last couple of years, at least 2 to 3 years. Now here we are, we're on the precipice, we're on the cusp of this moment. And a lot of times there'll be a great deal of expectation placed on these aspects. And it'll be like, oh, well, gee, it was just another day, right? But we don't always understand the ramifications of certain things. We don't always understand how there could be a lesser or minor event and something that doesn't really move the needle on the headlines that does have an impact from that particular moment in time. Okay, just understand that and realize that. At the same time, you know, this is a pretty massive stellium here. Jupiter, Sun, Mercury, Saturn, all right there. And you know, I would say that there is some definite intensity around this eclipse and around this event. So when we look at it, what are we talking about? We're talking about potentially economic, right? Because some of the economic stuff is in here. You know, you've got this square going on with Uranus, right? Uranus is squaring off. Let's see what we got here with Pluto. We got a Uranus-Pluto square. That's pretty significant. And Pluto is going to continue to move closer and closer into this square with Uranus. We also have some geopolitical stuff that's really starting to brew. And I've been keeping my eye on tonight about what's going on in Iraq. There's a lot of intensity happening in Iraq right now. And there's been some missiles that have been fired, if I'm not mistaken, in Baghdad. So we want to keep our eye on that part of the world. Things are starting to heat up a little bit. They're starting to brew a little bit. You know, so we're talking geopolitical forces. This is pretty unstable stuff right here. So we're dealing with financial, we're dealing with geopolitical, and the way that sort of everything has been kind of assembled in kludge, it's kind of like a Jenga building, and then you just pull one of these little pieces, and it's kind of, at this point in time, I wouldn't say it's rigged to collapse, but there's so much stress and so much pressure that is currently building and has been building for a while. I mean, you throw the impeachment stuff in, and I'm going to get into some of the divide and conquer left-right stuff, because that's all part of 2020 significantly. But this eclipse has a really precarious balance, super precarious balance. We have the ascendant at 20 Taurus. There's Algol kind of lurking around the ascendant there. But it's this Pluto conjunction, the wide conjunction with the midheaven, to me represents and symbolizes the shuttering. There's a shuttering here of the current system. When I say shuttering, not S-H-U-T-T-R-E-I-N-G, but shuttering, like something that moves, something quake-like that moves, and you feel it. And it has the feeling of the what's the I Ching hexagram? Thunder. This period that we're in, from the eclipse through this Saturn-Pluto conjunction, has a thundering effect, and it will get people's attention. It'll grab your attention, and I don't believe that it signals planetary doom, but there's something here that is seismic. And if you're paying attention, it is a significant wake-up call. And just keep in mind now, and I do believe 2020 is a portal of crisis. So you're going to have to keep a cool head in 2020. You know, we've seen the potential for crisis building, and it's still really coalescing in a lot of ways. Sparking and crackling of crisis coalescing. That's what We've been feeling this for a while. So keep your head and wits about you, but also remember, in a period of crisis, and I'm not saying this from like a Wall Street perspective, but there is also significant opportunity in crisis. And this is where people can test themselves. And it's also one's ability to look around and assess the landscape and assess the resources in your environment. Because when we get into this lunar eclipse, Cancer, to me, does represent where are we with our resources? Where are we with the things that are going to take care of us, or how we can take care of other people? We still have the true node here. That'll be in Cancer until May. So there's also this kind of beacon that's connected to resources during this time. Get a greater understanding of your resources. Mars is in Sagittarius and squaring against Venus in Aquarius, which is interesting because it's the early degrees, like mathematics. So when we have Mars in Sagittarius, we have stridency. And there's a lot of people that think they know what's right and true. Just watch out for that. Because that Mars is going to come on strong. We've had Mars in Scorpio for a while, and Mars goes into Sagittarius, I think, in the 3rd of January. So we're starting the year off with Mars and Sag, and that's fervent energy. If you want to make change in your life, Mars and Sagittarius is great. It's great because you can lock in with kind of a higher order or higher ideal, and you can plug Mars right in. It's like, man, let's go. Here we have the inconjunct with Mars and Uranus. And again, to me, this feels seismic. The word that keeps coming up is shuddering. Like there's this shuddering, lurching energy that wakes people up. This period, I believe, has the potential to wake people up, even more so, right? And then, will it be returning to business as usual? Possibly, quite possibly. But we haven't seen this in a very long time. We haven't seen this congregation, the planets in Capricorn, for a very, very long time. This stellium is pretty intense. And we have the South Node on conjuncting Jupiter. That, to me, is a bit concerning because, to me, that represents some kind of overreach. And we're starting to see this now. We're starting to see the script unfold with the overreach of government. It's been going on for a while now, but we're really starting to see it. And Jupiter in Capricorn is big, right? It wants to make, theoretically, these systems bigger, the systems that are associated with Capricorn bigger. And with the South Node here, it's like, oh, hold on a second. We're pushing back on that. Why? Because the true node is over here in the sign of Cancer. We want to be more interdependent in many ways versus having this dependency upon this overarching structure. There is also a very interesting trine with the moon and Neptune. So there's also going to be a heightened sense of intuition and awareness during this time. I would not be surprised if people have very powerful dreams, premonitions, a feeling that something is about to take place. It's kind of like the stuff that people were experiencing pre 9/11. And I'm not saying we're going to have another 9/11. Okay, so let me front load that. But there is a heightened sense of people feeling something in a very deep way here. This in conjunct, to me, this is seismic with Mars in conjunct Uranus. Very seismic. It's a fiery time. Definitely a fiery time. And also this stellium gathered together, right on the precipice and the cusp of this 0 degrees Aquarius midheaven, which to me is like cultural change during this eclipse. I've got it for 1 p.m. on Washington, D.C. And, you know, the moon will be a little bit later in the day, but this is about as exact as it gets right here with the opposition to the sun. What do you guys think? What are your thoughts on this upcoming eclipse? And not just the eclipse, but the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. You guys are pretty sharp. You're pretty turned on. Let me check in with you. What do you guys have to say? What are your thoughts on it? Let's see. What's going on with Soleil? I'm seeing something here. My sister died on the 26th eclipse, during eclipse. Soleil, you're down there too. Soleil is in that part of the world. I'm sorry to hear that. I'm very sorry to hear that. I'll be pleasantly surprised if more people wake up. Good. Yeah, it'd be great. Let's see, what else do we have? Been feeling a huge need to grow more of my own food. That's from Miranda. Already planting my spring garden. That's good. What else do we have? Food is less of an issue when you're my age. An apple is a point of gratitude. Eris at 23 is a squaring Saturn Pluto, which is disruption, eruptive. Hey, Jillian, nice to see you. Let's see. What else do we have here? Seattle is crazy expensive. What are your guys' thoughts? What are your guys' thoughts? Yeah, let's see. Show. I got to go through here. Sometimes Facebook, I'm sorry, YouTube will hold back comments. And I'm just going to go through here and just make a lot of these comments, which YouTube has lovingly censored for me. I'm just going to go through here. So if you guys have put a comment in and I haven't, it hasn't shown up, I just okayed it. Spiritus, Robert, what do we think about the fact the eclipse and the Pluto side? Also, yes. Yeah, it's getting really close to the Pluto, U.S. Pluto, which is at what, 26? Capricorn. We're going to go through a change here, and I wanted to kind of maybe phase shift into that a little bit because it feels like, I mean, to me, the end game is really going to be about the United Nations and this kind of version of global governance and, you know, the quote unquote United States, because the idea ultimately is to flip the script, right? And to bring everything into one unified whole. And the United Nations was created towards that end. And it's feeling, I'm just feeling more this sense of the United Nations and their involvement, right? We know that the United Nations is tied into Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, Smart Cities program, right? They're really pushing. The United Nations is also very much into the refugee resettlement program, which is essentially part of this idea of the next wave of the reset. And they're a significant governing body to that end. They're the ones that are making these global policies. And in some ways, the global policies even beginning to supersede the national sovereignty or the sovereignty of certain countries, right? So one of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted to look at the UN's chart, which I brought up here today. So the UN was founded in 1945. And it was founded in San Francisco, which is, I think, interesting. Because there are two really powerful global entities that were formed in and around San Francisco. One is the UN, and the other is Bohemian Grove and the Bohemian Club, all within 30 miles of each other. So when you look up the UN chart, it's usually using the time based on Washington, D.C. But it was not founded in Washington, D.C. It was founded in San Francisco. But I use the Washington, D.C. time anyway. So when you look at the UN chart, what do we have here? It was 4:45 p.m. We have Aries on the ascendant, which is pretty aggressive, right? Like this is an entity that wants to force its will upon the world. We also see that it has this Moon-Uranus conjunction in the sign of Gemini. And if the moon does represent home in the chart, then it's a radical reorienting of this idea of home. Uranus being the ruler of Aquarius, again, which is more global, international in a lot of ways. Then we have the midheaven at 10 Capricorn. And what's interesting now is that this Saturn-Pluto conjunction and even the eclipse, which is going to be taking place down here, right? This lunar eclipse is going to be right there, conjunct Sirius in the UN chart. And then, of course, the sun will be here when the eclipse arrives, and Jupiter will be here. They'll all be up here, kind of clustered around the midheaven of the UN chart. And so I also believe that this upcoming eclipse will be an activation for the United Nations, just based on the chart. So whatever happens during this eclipse phase, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction phase, will have an impact and a role to play in the eclipse chart. And remember now, Saturn and Pluto are right here, right? They're right at the top of this chart for the UN. What's also really interesting, you look at some of these angles. You have the one thing that really grabbed my attention was Sirius, right at the IC. You know, I mean, these things don't happen. You know, there was a reason why the UN was ratified at this time. Now, whether it's in Washington, D.C. or whether it's San Francisco, doesn't really matter. This chart is basically the same. One is 20 degrees on the ascendant. This is 19 or 10 or 11, but it's Sirius right down here at the bottom of the chart. Right at the IC. And Sirius, of course, is a major star when it comes to the history or the theoretical history of the planet. Our binary sun, the twin. You know, we have some Gemini nomenclature coming into play. Of course, Sirius plays a significant role as well with the creation of the United States, and that they chose that time when Heliocal Sirius was conjunct the U.S. sun. So here we have the United Nations with Sirius at the IC. 1945, the inception. So they're basically saying the sort of the home planet here, the home star for the UN is right here at the IC, or the chart, you know, literally, figuratively driving everything through the rest of the chart. Then we have Spica over here, very, very close to the descendant. And then we see that the sun is at 1 degree Scorpio, which means that this is going to be a transformational agent. That's going to be the nature of the UN. And we also have a square going on as well with Sun-Mars, force if needed, right, with the Sun-Mars. And the Mars-Saturn conjunction, exact, just about at 24, again, down in the 4th house. So one of the things with Mars, like when there is Mars in Capricorn, like one of the qualities of Mars in Capricorn is endurance. People that have Mars and Capricorn in their chart have tremendous endurance. They're really able to withstand a lot, work hard out, long hours, work hard. The Mars-Saturn conjunction has some of that as well. But there's a kind of enduring quality to Mars-Saturn. So the long haul, right? This is a long haul operation. They're in this for the long run with the Mars-Saturn conjunction. Ultimately, with the South Node in Capricorn, I feel like they're coming into their nodal return here, which is also pretty significant, I think, for the UN. Ultimately, I think it's going to be a failed enterprise. And you look at some of the UN's work around the world, I mean, it's kind of a failure. I mean, look what happened in Somalia and Mogadishu. It was terrible. Black Hawk down, South Node in Capricorn, 9th house. But what they do is then they take people, or they take that situation and they'll turn it into their advantage, right? And they'll relocate and they'll resettle people. There's that true node in Cancer in the 3rd house. So I feel like this eclipse and this stellium is also very much related to the UN. So the answer to your question is that I don't think we can talk about the United States without talking about the United Nations. And what would happen in time of a crisis? The United Nations would kick in, correct? This chart is really interesting because of the conjunctions. Look at Venus, Neptune here. I mean, look how tight that conjunction is. And it's in the sign of Virgo, which looks like, oh, selfless and serving. It's so tight. When you get into those tight conjunctions, sometimes it can be very pure, but it'll be very, very difficult to understand or determine the motivation or what's going on with how tight those conjunctions are. Jupiter, Chiron, 12-12, Venus and Neptune, 7-7, Mars, Saturn, 24-24. Look at that, how tight that stuff is, man. It's almost airtight in a lot of ways. We have Mercury in conjunct Uranus. That's really interesting. That's really, really interesting. To me, this is ordo ab chao. This is order out of chaos. Uranus is chaos, especially in Gemini. In what is Scorpio, Mercury in Scorpio, it's fixed. So here we have the chaos, and here we have the idea or the plan. And by the way, Mercury is the highest planet in this chart. You know, at 15 Scorpio. Interesting. So I don't think we can have a conversation about the United States without talking about the United Nations, especially when it comes to this upcoming eclipse in the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. So last night, laying around and looking at some stuff with Prince William, and read a really compelling thread on Prince William as the Antichrist, by the way. Very powerful, wild stuff around Prince William. So I'm not going to go through it because it's just too dense. But what I did do is I wanted to look at Prince William's chart as it relates to some of the stuff that I was, poking around at with this one thread. So let me bring up this chart, because I feel like this is, in terms of predictions, it feels like this is the year that Prince William gets activated. That's one of the predictions that I have, so this is Prince William's activation year. So let's check this out. So Prince William was born on the summer solstice in 1982, 0 Cancer, right? So one of the things that's going to happen, so when we get into May, the true node, transited true node, is going to conjunct Prince William's sun. And to me, this is the activation point. This is when Prince William's programming theoretically kicks in, right? Theoretically, right here. The other thing that was really interesting about Prince William's chart, again, as I began to kind of root around this stuff and look at some of these pieces here. Let me just, what is this? Yes. So Sirius is conjunct his true node, right? Think about that for a second. Sirius is conjunct Prince William's true node. The galactic center is conjunct his ascendant. Spica, right here on Pluto. To me, this is sort of this mark of destiny, right? True node conjunct Sirius, and then the galactic center on his ascendant. And this Jupiter also conjunct the midheaven, right? The second sun, and he's got this almost exact trine from Jupiter to the sun in this chart. Incredibly expansive, right? Really, really expansive. And this eclipse that we're talking about, where is it taking place? Right in his first house. So the lunar eclipse will be over here in his 7th house, passing through his stellium in Cancer. So from this lunar eclipse to the stellium in Capricorn, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, which will not happen on his ascendant, but will happen down here in his chart. It'll still be in the first house. These eclipses are going to play a huge role, I believe, in William's chart in his life this year. This is the year that William comes online. Now, I can't make a case for him as the Antichrist, but there is clearly some very interesting and very specific kinds of markings here, factors. The galactic center on the ascendant, Sirius on his true node, and this Jupiter conjunction with the midheaven in Scorpio, right? The power to remake the world in a lot of ways. Lots of inconjuncts as well with Uranus to the sun. To me, the Uranus-Sun inconjunct is an eruption again. It's an awakening. And we're going to see that very, very soon. Mars, transiting Mars, is going to hit his Uranus. But again, in May, that true node is going to hit his sun. So then I thought to myself, well, how is this going to, how does his chart line up with the UN? Before I go there, he also has this Yod, which is with Chiron. And look, it's right at this conjunction with freaking Algol. How about that? And the Algol keeps showing up again and again and again and again in all these charts that I've been doing now for the last 4 or 5 months, right? This is really like very much in line with Trump's midheaven in Taurus, which has Algol right up here. Now here we have Chiron also in Taurus conjunct Algol as well. And we have this Yod, right, with Pluto and with Neptune. Wow, that's heavy, Dan. To me, this is, I can see this idea with this Yod to Prince William's Chiron as being some kind of a savior or a healer, because we're dealing with these transpersonal forces with Neptune and Pluto coming right into Chiron. And if you look at his chart, Chiron is really the first planet we run into. It's not, it's the first planetoid we run into in his chart. And it's in Taurus, which represents this world, the Earth. And there's something about this Yod which is crisis related, right? So over the course of the next 7 years, Uranus is going to hit Prince William's Chiron and activate this Yod. But this is the year that I think we're going to see Prince William move into more of a global position. You're going to see him, right? He's going to come online this year. And I do believe that and when we get into the eclipse in July, that's going to take place right there, right on his true node, conjunct Sirius. So I did a chart as it relates to Prince William in the UN. You guys check this out. This is really where it all comes together. And when I put this together, it was like, whoa. To me, this was kind of the missing piece here. Okay. All right. So when you do the synastry between Prince William's chart and the UN's chart, this is Prince William on the inside. look where the sun of the UN is. It's right here. Here we have the twin suns, right? Our current sun and theoretically the second sun, and the sun of the UN aligns right on his Jupiter and right on his midheaven. That's just for starters. Let's go all the way around here. Here's the true node of the UN. Yep. And what's happening here? Conjunct Prince William's sun, right there. See that? Bada bing. His vertex conjunct Pluto and Leo when the UN was founded. Now, the south node of the UN, right, which we looked at before, falls right on his black moon Lilith and the part of fortune. But that's not uncommon because he has his south node also in the first house as well. But his south node just is on the UN's midheaven in Capricorn. So the nodes line up, right? They line up. And so what does this all mean? I mean, what I see is that the UN will be the vehicle through which Prince William has the potential to reign supreme or rule. That's what it looks like to me. When I look at this chart, that's what I'm getting. And then there's this stellium in Libra, which is part of the UN chart and also part of Prince William's chart, right? Jupiter, Chiron, Neptune, Venus, Mars, Saturn, exalted in Libra, all in the ninth house, all in Prince William's chart, right? So these forces, these Libran forces are at this sort of global position where it reaches the world at large. There's a kind of a greater point of access here. And the coming together of Venus and Mars, which is the masculine and the feminine, there's agreement here, right? And Jupiter and Saturn also. There's really interesting conjunctions up here in being able, again, to reach the world at large. And then the Mars-Saturn conjunction in Cancer in the seventh house, partnership. So it really feels to me like the UN will be the global kind of vessel for Prince William. It won't be England. It'll be the UN. The two, when you put the two together, it's like a horse and a harness. You know, a horse and a chariot in some ways. The two work together very specifically. I mean, check this out. The UN sun is right on his freaking midheaven. And the true node is right here on his sun and new moon, of course, being born on the summer solstice, midsummer's night. And he also has Neptune on his ascendant, which I thought was really interesting. And, that being in Sagittarius, Neptune and Sag at the final degrees, right? Let's go through this and validate Neptune. Yeah, 25 degrees, of course, conjunct the galactic center. That there's kind of a savior quality with Neptune on the ascendant, especially in Sagittarius, and especially conjunct the galactic center. But with Neptune also, there's a quality of deception as well. Remember that. I thought it was interesting. And again, I got here because I started to trip through a lot of these other kind of numerical sequences based on his birth time and a lot of other cycles, equinoctial cycles, annular cycles. And then when I hooked the two up, it's like, wow, that's really interesting. So it feels to me, again, this is kind of the predictive model, that one of the things that we're going to see in 2020 is I feel like Prince William's going to start to really move closer to the world stage. Like, I think he's going to move out of sort of the royal kind of oddity and much, much closer to this idea of being a global player And I do believe that the UN will provide that kind of a structure for him. Like it was almost set up in a lot of ways. And how does that happen? Well, it happens through some kind of crisis. Some kind of crisis. Whether it's real or whether it's manufactured. And look, we have so many brush fires going on all across the planet right now that it wouldn't be hard to either ignite one, start one, manufacture one. One of the themes for 2020, again, from a predictive model, is we're going to have more divide and conquer. I'll go over that maybe a bit more next week. Let me check in with you guys and see where you're at. Thoughts on some of the stuff I've been talking about. Let's see where you're at. Year on pre-screw. Yes, I totally agree. Many Britons confident and supporting the royal family. Folks are over it. North knows symbolism, saving symbols, which to me. Andrew is out. Meghan and Harry out. What else do we have? Let's see, Mr. Rectangle chart. The yacht is configuration as well as 3 planetary bodies from aspects of the birth chart. It's a yacht. Okay. What else do we have here? Americans will never accept you. I agree with that, Shari. I agree with that. Let's see. I do not believe for a second people are hating the monarchy. Well, here's what I think. I think there's this, and again, I'm not making a case for the monarchy because I think people are kind of over this shit. I agree with you. But they always treat the monarch, there's always like this weird kind of fetish with the monarchy. I mean, they're always on, cover of People magazine, and there's this fairy tale stuff. And at the same time, it's like these are the people that have accumulated massive amounts of resources. Like the monarchy has been around for a very long time. Like they actually originate from Venice. That's how long they've been around. They have massive amounts of resources. Massive. Very easily. They just don't. And I feel like what we're seeing ultimately will be kind of a group that wants to come in and essentially, I've talked about this for years now. And the idea is that we're all sitting down at a poker table. And when you're playing in a tournament, in a poker tournament, there's one person at the end that has all the chips. And it's not like, oh, well, I'm going to go win like $5,000 and I'll just step away from the table. When you're in a tournament, you're in it to the end. There's only one winner of a poker tournament, and they get all the chips. So the idea here would be for the people who have been controlling the resources for a long time to have all the chips, and they will do that at almost any cost. That's the nature of the game. And they may create systems along the way in order to create kind of an illusion so that people have this idea at times that they have some chips on the table, some chips in the game. And to some extent they do. But at some point it's like, okay, well, people are going to go all in because it's human nature. And there's also demonic nature involved in this as well. To Shari's point, I would agree with that this is the kind of the one sort of global entity where people are, not really thrilled about this idea, or one entity where people are not thrilled about this idea of global governance. It's kind of embedded in some ways. We're seeing some of that in places like Poland and Hungary, because they went through the Soviet Union, and man, they are not going to go back. They do not want to. They just, they've gotten that yoke off their back, and they see what's going on in the world. It's like, screw that shit. We're going to close our borders. We're not going to have people tell us what to do. And so it's been very difficult for the UN to assert its refugee relocation program in some of those countries. And in this country, people are, again, people are waking up. They don't know what they can do. this point, for the most part. But they are waking up. And we're going to start to see some things happening in places like Virginia, where the governor there is, calling for arms, right? They wanted the rifle ban, the assault weapons ban. Now, who do you think is behind that? Who do you think is behind that? I would say likely it's the UN, because they don't want any sovereignty. The UN is this body that doesn't want any sovereignty. They just don't. This has been going on for a long time. It's not like the UN has just been some, group of Johnny-come-latelys. This goes all the way back to the Fabians and way before that as well. It's just this body that has been commodified in order to bring this thing forward, right? So in 2020, what we're going to see is we're going to start to see all this stuff begin to get really splashed up. We're going to, because the pieces now on the global chessboard are going to be moved. That's what's happening. That's what's happening. And at the same time, right? At the same time, you as an individual are also coming online. So you get to move your own pieces, your own life as well. And so we're going to see this stuff, and it's going to cause a greater level of awakening. People are going to, and we're for better or worse, right? Like, I'm not sitting here banging the Republican drum. I'm not banging the Trump drum. But I'll tell you, there are people who have been watching what's been going on with the impeachment trial, and they're waking up. They say, what the fuck are these people doing? I don't want to be a part of this, right? This is what's happening now. So to me, 2020 is like next level stuff, right? We get to really see things. And in your own life, right, there's two factors here in 2020. I've been talking about this. One is the thunderclap, right? We get the 220s, the judgment times 2. And then we have the 22, which is the call to mastery. And the two are not mutually exclusive, by the way. They're not mutually exclusive. So I'm going to come back next week, and I'll get into very specific predictions. So this is part 1, right? This is part 1. And this is what we're talking about here from the macro level, is this shift that is going to be taking place, right? From this world that we're living in now, and this idea of kind of where we've been for the last, let's go back to 1945 when the UN started, or begun. So what is it, 1945, 70, 2015, 80 years, right? 70 years. So the last 70 years. So we're going to see this, we're going to start to see things begin to move. We're going to start to see the kind of outer manifestations of this push towards a greater kind of global governance, but at the same time, there's going to be this equal, but also, that's what I'm looking for, equally intense push individually. So we're going to see these things happening simultaneously, right? Because we have the 220s with the 22, so we're going to see more of this global governance manifestation. It's going to happen. It'll happen through some level of crisis-oriented activity. We've seen it before. 9/11 is a clear example of that. 2 weeks ago, I talked about Richard Jewell, what happened in Atlanta, another example of that. So we're going to see that, but we're also going to see simultaneously what's happening with us, and what awakens inside of us, and what we're able to do as well. So hang in there, right? Strap it in, right? Buckle your seatbelts. It's going to be a hell of a ride this year, and you're going to have the opportunity for tremendous strides in your own life. Okay, this is really something that I want to, import to you, or impart to you, impart. I want to share this with you. You can make tremendous strides in your life this year. Profound growth if you're willing to take the risks, to have the intention, and to push yourself in a way that you have not pushed yourself before. What are you capable of? Whatever you're capable of, go past it. Okay. In the meantime, we're also going to see, again, this continued process of the deconstruction phase, which we've been watching essentially since 2016, when Trump took office. That's not going to abate. And as we have the deconstruction phase continue, you're going to see people, agencies, personalities, entities try to come in and create some kind of order and control and reform as a result. Just be wise to it. That's all you got to do. Just be wise. All right, let me check in with you guys. All right, I typed LSD in this chat. My Pinterest feed is all red and white mushroom images all of a sudden. Oh, that's interesting. The date fruit is Phoenix plant with 14 species. Olympia is terrible. Olympia, I stay out of Olympia. You guys talking about Olympia, Washington? I used to live there. I used to live in Olympia. Sorry if it's a read, but UN has backed a China convention. Yes, there you go. See? The UN and China are hand in glove, man. China, they've designated China as the new model, where people are globally governed, and their social profile is duly monitored. By the way, I got kicked off of Facebook for a month, a whole month. I'm going to be off of Facebook for a month. It was starting 2 days ago, the 27th. I went on there, I went to post something. It's like, holy shit. The lords of Facebook have finally blocked me. For some people, they get 3 weeks a week, or three days a week, something like that. For me, it was a month. Badge of honor, I guess. Anyway, I'm going to be checking out some other social media stuff. Facebook. I'm going to go check somebody else out, Facebook. I do have a Twitter page. Sometimes I post on there. Not very much. Usually not a whole lot astrologically. So the main outlet really is here on YouTube. But I do have an Instagram account. Maybe I'll start to do some stuff over there. I got a month. I get to play around, check out some other social networks and platforms. But I'll keep you abreast. Let's talk about the schedule this week. I am tomorrow, no show, and then we have the rest of the week. I'm taking off, doing a little bit of traveling. I'll be back. I promise I'll be back on Friday for the Friday Forecast. I wanted to do this Friday, but my mom was around, and it was not happening. It was not happening. Plus, we had to travel into Austin. So I'll be back Friday in the Friday Forecast. I'll be back next Sunday night for Sunday Night Astro Live. No 15 Minutes of Flame this week, but I will be back banging it in the following week. So this is it, man. These next 2 weeks will be really interesting to watch, to observe, to participate in. We've all been talking about the upcoming conjunction. So hang on. Hang on. Be your own rocket man and rocket woman. All right. I'm Robert Phoenix. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to stable what's possible. Thank you, everybody, for this final Sunday Night Astro Live of 2019 and the 2010s. It's been really great, and I'm looking forward to let's just wrap our arms around the next decade, all right? As much as we can, all of us together, for however long this thing is going to last and continue to evolve, right? So I'm in it to win it. I got Saturn and Capricorn in my chart, Saturn trine Pluto in my chart. So I'm here. I'm here. I'm dedicated to this work, And thank you, each and every one of you, for being on this journey with me. And if I don't connect with any of you, have yourself a really good Gregorian end of your new year, and dare to be more. All right, I'm out of here. See you.